Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. I'm Dr. Julie Costin.
And I'm Dr. Christy Preddy-Franzak. We're so glad you're here as we explore all things inclusion.
So whether you're a school leader, an educator, a parent, or simply passionate about inclusion, this podcast is for you.
In each episode, we go beyond the usual conversations, diving into what truly makes inclusive education work.
Together, let's make a difference, one conversation at a time. Here we go. Welcome, everyone, to the Inclusion Podcast. This is episode 34, and it's all about stressors. Now, Christy, why on earth are we doing a podcast about stressors?
I know it. I was just thinking, everybody's going to push stop right now. Like, I don't need a podcast about stress. But notice we said stressors, not stress. So the reason we're doing it is because stressors actually stress us out. And another thing that is really important in our work supporting educators, if we're administrators and or students, is that we recognize and reduce stressors. So we have to figure out what are they so I can learn how do I recognize and then reduce them.
Well, and there's one more thing I think we need to talk about, which is stressors cause behaviors. And so when we see behaviors, we often make wrong assumptions. The assumptions we often make are this kid is being manipulative, this student has decided to make a bad choice. And what we want to talk about today is that, in fact, the human brain is set up so that the more stressors they have, the harder it is to stay in their prefrontal cortex or to make good choices.
Well, and Julie, since we're kind of drawing the parallel between the adults that we support and the students that we support, sometimes what we might see is resistance, or we might see people are unwilling or seem unwilling to change their mindset, across ages. So kind of keep that in mind as we talk about stressors too, that we forget that there's a person behind the behavior, or rather a student behind the behavior as well.
Yes. So we're going to share with you a checklist of common stressors. And the reason we're going to share it with you is if you realize how stressors can impact students' behavior, you become a stress detective and you become someone who reduces stressors. So how I'm going to ask people to think about that is kind of interesting. It's to stop whatever you're doing, and if you can, close your eyes and think about your entire body. Is there anything annoying or itchy or cold or hot or sweaty or achy that is bothering you? So when I did that, Christy, just now, my feet are cold and I don't like this tag in I have a sweater on and the tag is bugging me, but I didn't think about it until I just asked everybody to think about it.
Well, and I'm like over here scratching my head and scratching my knee and scratching my arm. It's like, why do I all of a sudden itch?
Okay. So what's happening is we're becoming a teeny bit aware, because I asked you to, about your biological domain, meaning all of your physiological systems, your digestive system, your nervous system, your bodily systems. And Christy got immediately itchy. And I noticed the cold and hot parts of me and the things that are poking me. Now, imagine or notice that those were under our awareness, meaning we weren't thinking about them until we made ourselves think about them. The human brain is constantly managing all kinds of stressors, many different kinds of stressors. And now if you're a kid, so picture that you're a kindergartner and you have an itchy tag and cold feet, and there are bright lights and there are distractions, and you ate some sugar pops for breakfast and your lips are chapped and your fabric is crunchy and you have to pee, and right? All of those things are causing the student to struggle to stay in their prefrontal cortex. But what we just mentioned was only a part of the kinds of stressors that students have. We just mentioned the biological stressors.
Yeah, and Julie, I was thinking like, this is going to stress people out just talking about how many things are stressors. But let's talk a little bit about the next domain, which are the emotional domain. And this is the reason I like this one is because it's strong emotions. And I often think of you, Julie, on this one because it's like, it doesn't mean that they're positive or negative. Sometimes those positive emotions like excitement or enthusiasm can lead to having big responses. And so it's not like, oh, they're bad things that are happening, but they're still big in your body.
So, Christy, anyone listening that's an educator only must think of a student whose birthday it is.
Good example, yeah.
And so they come in the door and you can see on their face that the learning that's going to take place is going to be difficult today because they're too excited. And the word too related to these feelings, what we're saying is in their regulatory state, it's too much for their system. I mean, I'm going to give a real example yesterday, Christy. I bought a brand new journal and I couldn't sleep last night because I was thinking tomorrow I get to use my brand new journal. I know that's bananas. I'm 52 years old, but I realized I'm not sleeping because tomorrow is a new journal, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what is so unique about us, that we don't really know what causes a big stressor for other people. And it's a positive thing, right? A new journal. So when we think about, I don't know if we mentioned, but you can get our checklist of common stressors at inclusiveschooling.com/download34. You can add to them, subtract from them. But as you think about common stressors, you know, I was looking over, Julie, before we started, and like feeling unwelcome or feeling uncertain. Think about how many students are newcomers or have just moved to your community for whatever reason, or school is just new to them. Imagine all the different changing routines and the confusion and the unfamiliar nature of even school lunch. And that's just a handful in one of the 4 domains.
So the 4 domains that we started to mention are biological, meaning the body system domain, emotional, meaning strong emotion domain, and we have 2 more domains. And there's the cognitive domain, which is stress caused from processing information. So every time a student is given a direction, a correction, or a question, that's a stressor on the brain. And what I'm hoping everybody is thinking is, wow, it's amazing they can hold it together as well as they are. I think this helps me as an educator have more empathy for those learners who are dysregulated. And I think it gives me a bunch more strategies to reduce stressors instead of add a consequence or a reward or some other type external factor.
Well, and interesting you said empathy, Julie, because the 4th and final domain, and then we're going to give you 10 ways to reduce stressors, is experiencing empathy. So isn't that interesting that that feeling of empathy actually, let's say, takes some of your gas out of your gas tank. It depletes you in some way, or it stresses your system in some way, even though it's such an important thing and skill. So just know that there are these 4 domains and they're always at play, and each human will experience the same stimuli differently. And sometimes it's the additive effect. Sometimes it's just that one today. So let's talk, Julie, about what are some of our go-to ways now that we can recognize them more. How can we reduce them?
I'm going to pick the 3rd one down, which is give visual supports. I think I like this one because I'm someone who has ADHD as an attribute, and excessive verbal information is very frustrating and confusing, and I shut down after not too long. But if there's a really nice visual or a place that I can look to say, oh, I need to do this and then this, all of a sudden my nervous system is back in check and I'm back online. So visual supports could be written or drawn or displayed directions or any options for making the unpredictable predictable or visual.
I'll pick one, Julie, and then maybe you can just read the 10 for folks who don't have the download or just want a summary of the 10 without explaining them. But that was the 3rd one, which is how a visual support reduces stressors. I'm going to pick in the list, it's the 9th one, of reducing demands. And I'm going to pick this one because I feel like there's like 5 things incorporated into one strategy. So reducing demands comes down to the following things that I can do. Now, eventually we help students and our colleagues and ourselves recognize our own stressors. Just quickly, side note, like last night, I had to have a big conversation with my husband about money and where to move money around from accounts, but numbers don't stay in my head. So instead of like going into the meeting and having a meltdown, I said to him, you know what? I really don't do well with verbal conversations about money. If you could just make a list of how much money needs to be moved from here to there, I'll follow it. But that's, I'm 54 at the time of this recording, and it's taken me all that time to advocate for myself. So even though this number 9 of reducing demands kind of is an external, I can also do it internally. So I can reduce the number of tasks or directions or the amount of input that is verbal that can support my nervous system. We can provide choices, which we love choices. Julie, maybe you could talk about pig grouping, and we can give additional time. So just giving space for time can relax nervous systems. But tell us quickly the pig grouping as a choice, because it's such a powerful way to reduce stressors in social situations.
Well, if you remember, that 4th domain was about social stressors. It's about the stressors of interacting with people. And all the time in education, we're like, partnering is good, small group work is important, let's do it, and let's do a lot of it. I agree with all of that. However, there are times and days that I don't want to work with a partner. And there are times and days and moments where your students don't want to partner with each other. And what I love is this strategy called PIG grouping, partner, individual, group, PIG. And it means everybody has a choice in how they complete the work. And now nervous systems are relaxed, stressors are reduced. I can work in a way that makes sense to me today. And I don't have to do an additional cognitive stressor, but also social stressor.
Yeah. Okay. You're right, Julie. They go together. Okay. So you get the idea, friends, that there is a checklist or there's a way to think about common stressors. And we've got 10 tips, which each of them has multiple inside there for you to unpack. And you can get inclusiveschooling.com/download34. And to wrap up this episode, Julie will list the 10 top ways to reduce stressors.
Okay. So they are: go quiet, ask open-ended questions, give visual support, offer breaks, get creative, show compassion, reduce the size of the group, reduce inputs, reduce demands, and slow down and give time for processing. Thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe and catch up on past episodes where we share valuable insights, straight talk, and practical steps to challenge outdated special education practices. You can find every episode with the show notes at inclusiveschooling.com/inclusion-podcast to build more inclusive schools together.